members of Congress face almost no electoral accountability for their institutional performance. If a member's primary concern is re-election, and re-election is virtually guaranteed regardless of institutional performance, what incentive exists to conduct serious oversight? Why investigate agencies that might retaliate? Why take positions that might generate controversy? Why do anything that might, however slightly, increase electoral risk? The rational strategy is go along, get along, not rock any boats.
Welcome to the Consequential Actions podcast, where we aim to learn how history impacts current events and affects our lives today through the lens of politics, the economy, technology, and business trends. I may be an AI, but your host, well, he is not artificial in any way. Here is Jeff Kellick.
In 1975, Senator Frank Church posed a question to the American people. After documenting assassinations, coups, drug experiments on unwitting subjects, mass surveillance of American citizens, and the infiltration of American newsrooms, after cataloging what he called a secret government operating within the constitutional government, Church asked, "Who guards the guardians?" His committee's answer was to create new guardians: the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, new rules requiring the executive branch to inform Congress of covert operations, new restrictions on domestic surveillance, new oversight mechanisms designed to prevent the abuses they had documented. Well, 50 years later, we can assess the results. The CIA provided false intelligence that took the nation to war in Iraq. No one was fired. The director received the Presidential Medal of Freedom. The NSA conducted mass surveillance of American citizens and programs that Edward Snowden called unconstitutional. The programs were modified, but no one was held accountable. The intelligence community failed to predict 9/11. A 2005 Inspector General report concluded the CIA director bore ultimate responsibility. Of course, he had already received that Medal of Freedom. The oversight committees that Church's work created still exist. They hold hearings, they receive briefings, they issue occasional statements of concern. But when has any intelligence official faced serious consequences for failure? When has any agency been meaningfully constrained by congressional oversight? When has any abuse resulted in accountability rather than reform proposals that quietly die? The question posed by Church in 1975 remains unanswered. Who guards the guardians? And a darker question has emerged. What if no one wants to? Today, we examine why congressional oversight has failed, not occasionally, not in specific cases, but systematically across decades, regardless of which party holds power. The answer involves incentives, institutional capture, and the uncomfortable possibility that Congress protects the agencies because the agencies can protect Congress. I am Jeff Kellick, and this is the Consequential Actions Podcast. This is episode 10, part B, a contemporary application episode corresponding to episode 10 of the series, Empire of Liberty, America's Foreign Entanglements from the Founders to the Forever Wars. On Saturday, we examined 30 years of CIA covert operations, from the recruitment of Nazi war criminals in Operation Paperclip through the infiltration of American media in Operation Mockingbird, to the mass casualties in Indonesia and Chile. We ended with the Church Committee's brief moment of accountability. Today, We ask what happened after. The reforms were enacted, the oversight committees were created, and then what? Has any of it worked? Has anyone been held accountable for the failures that followed? Let us begin. The Church Committee's final report included 96 recommendations for reform. Many were implemented. Oversight committees were established. Reporting requirements were created. The Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act established warrant procedures for domestic surveillance. But reform, not the same as accountability. And oversight committees are only as effective as the people who staff them. A 2008 academic study examined member behavior on intelligence committees since their creation. The author was Dr. Locke Johnson, himself a former church committee staff director. He identified 4 categories of oversight approach. The first he called ostriches. They bury their head in the sand, deferring to executive judgment just as their predecessors did before 1975. The second he called cheerleaders. Cheerleaders view their role primarily as supporting the intelligence community, explaining its value to the public and defending it from criticism. His third category he called lemon suckers. They distrust intelligence agencies but lack the time, the staff, or the will to conduct any serious investigation. And then the fourth, he called them guardians. And this was the category the church had intended: to actually investigate, challenge, and hold agencies accountable. Johnson's assessment was pretty bleak. The majority of the committee members across both parties fell into the first 2 categories. They were ostriches or cheerleaders. The guardians were exceptional and rarely lasted long in their positions. The structural reasons are not hard to identify. Intelligence committee assignments are often viewed as stepping stones or consolation prizes, not as serious oversight responsibilities. Members rotate off quickly, staff expertise is limited, and the agencies control access to information. Members who ask hard questions find themselves excluded from briefings. And then there's the classification problem. Members who learn uncomfortable facts cannot discuss them publicly. Whistleblowers who reveal classified information face prosecution. The secrecy that protects legitimate operations also protects abuses from exposure. Which brings us to the test case, the most consequential intelligence failure since the Church Committee: Iraq. In October 2002, the CIA delivered a national intelligence estimate concluding that Iraq possessed weapons of mass destruction. Director George Tenet reportedly assured President Bush that it was a slam dunk case. Based in significant part on this intelligence, Congress authorized the use of force. The United States invaded Iraq. More than 4,400 American service members died. Estimates of Iraqi civilian deaths ranged from 150,000 to 600,000. And the war cost trillions of dollars. In July 2004, the Senate Intelligence Committee released its report on pre-war intelligence. The report was damning. It found that the intelligence community's assessment were overstated and unsupported by the underlying intelligence. It identified what Chairman Pat Roberts called groupthink. Analysts assuming Iraq had weapons and interpreting ambiguous evidence to confirm their assumptions. The report concluded that the CIA had no human intelligence sources, none in Iraq after 1998. It relied too heavily on Iraqi exiles and foreign intelligence services. It ignored or discounted conflicting information. The failures were documented. The consequences were what? George Tenet resigned in June 2004, citing personal reasons. But that December, President Bush awarded him the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the nation's highest civilian honor. Not fired, honored. The report recommended structural reforms. The Director of National Intelligence position was created. Agencies were reorganized. Procedures were modified. But no one was fired for getting the most consequential intelligence assessment in a generation catastrophically wrong. No one faced prosecution. No one faced professional consequences beyond retirement with honors. Senator Bob Graham, who served on the Intelligence Committee and opposed the Iraq War, said at the time, "It's hard to believe that we are now almost at the third anniversary of September 11th, and not one person has been held accountable for that egregious intelligence failure." He was speaking of 9/11, but the same would prove true of Iraq. The pattern has repeated consistently. The CIA's torture program violated domestic and international law. The Senate Intelligence Committee conducted a multi-year investigation. Its report, released in 2014, documented systematic brutality and concluded that the program produced no actionable intelligence that could have been obtained through legal means. No one was prosecuted. The investigation itself became a partisan battle. The CIA hacked Senate computers examining its records. The acting CIA director apologized, but no one faced consequences. The NSA's bulk collection program of American communications was revealed by Edward Snowden in 2013. The programs were later ruled illegal by federal courts. The oversight committees had been briefed, had known, and had done nothing to stop or expose the programs. But consider the deeper irony here. The Director of National Intelligence, the position created after 9/11 specifically to improve oversight and accountability, was James Clapper. And on March 12th, 2013, Senator Ron Wyden asked Clapper directly, in an open hearing, does the NSA collect any type of data at all on millions or hundreds of millions of Americans? To which Clapper responded, "No, sir, not wittingly."
Last summer, the NSA director was at a conference, and he was asked a question about the NSA surveillance of Americans. He replied, and I quote here, "The story that we have millions or hundreds of millions of dossiers on people is completely false." The reason I'm asking the question is, having served on the committee now for a dozen years, I don't really know what a dossier is in this context. So what I wanted to see is if you could give me a yes or no answer to the question, does the NSA collect any type of data at all on millions or hundreds of millions of Americans?
No, sir.
It does not.
Not wittingly. There are cases where they could inadvertently, perhaps, collect, but not wittingly.
All right.
That was a lie. Clapper knew it was a lie. Wyden had given him the question a day before in advance. After the hearing, Wyden's staff asked Clapper's office to correct the record. They refused. 3 months later, Snowden's disclosures revealed the truth. The NSA was conducting bulk collection on Americans' communications metadata. Clapper had lied under oath to the United States Senate. The Director of National Intelligence, which was to provide accountability, lied directly to the Senate under oath. Snowden later explained what motivated him to act. He said, "It was seeing the Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper, directly lie under oath to Congress. Seeing someone in the position of James Clapper badly lying to the public without repercussion is the evidence of subverted democracy." Clapper later described his answer as the least untruthful response he could give. Of course, he was not prosecuted. The statute of limitations expired in 2018. He went on to enjoy a successful retirement career on television. now working directly to influence and color news reporting as a CNN contributor. Snowden was charged with espionage and remains in exile. The man who lied to Congress faces no consequences and gets a cushy gig on TV. The man who exposed it, well, he faces life in prison if he ever returns. The Oversight Committee, created after the Church Committee, has produced reports, hearings, and recommendations. It has not produced accountability. The Guardians have become cheerleaders or have been replaced by them. The failure of congressional oversight is not limited to intelligence. It has become a general characteristic of the institution. And examining why requires asking some uncomfortable questions about incentives. In 2024, 97% of congressional incumbents who sought re-election won. That's not a typo. 97%. The rate has been above 90% for decades. In the House, it has exceeded 90% in virtually every election since 1964. The Senate is slightly more volatile, but still overwhelmingly favors incumbents. These numbers suggest a fundamental misalignment. Congressional approval ratings hover around 30%, historically low. Confidence in Congress as an institution is at or near all-time lows. Yet the people who run Congress almost always win re-election. The explanation involves gerrymandering, campaign finance advantages, name recognition, and the self-sorting of Americans into politically homogenous communities. But whatever the causes, the consequence is clear. Members of Congress face almost no electoral accountability for their institutional performance. If a member's primary concern is re-election, and re-election is virtually guaranteed regardless of institutional performance, what incentive exists to conduct serious oversight? Why investigate agencies that might retaliate? Why take positions that might generate controversy? Why do anything that might, however slightly, increase electoral risk? The rational strategy is go along, get along, not rock any boats. Which leads to an even more uncomfortable question. On March 4th, 2026, the House of Representatives voted on a resolution that would have required disclosure of congressional sexual harassment settlements. For years, Congress has used taxpayer funds to settle harassment claims against its own members. The settlements are confidential. The identities of the harassers are secret. The amounts paid, reportedly more than $17 million, comes from public funds. Representative Nancy Mace of South Carolina introduced a resolution to release the Ethics Committee's records on these settlements, with victim identifying information redacted, of course. The vote was 357 to 65 to bury the resolution. 357 members, 175 Republicans and 182 Democrats voted to keep congressional harassment records sealed. The resolution was referred to committee, where it will die. Representative Mace said afterward, both parties colluded to protect predators. They voted to keep sexual harassment records buried, and they did it together. Representative Lauren Boebert told colleagues, go home and tell your daughters what you have done. Representative Anna Paulina Luna observed, we just had a member of Congress literally sexually harass someone who lit herself on fire, and you all protected him. Why would 357 members vote to bury these records? The charitable interpretation is concern for due process and victim privacy. That was the stated reason. The less charitable interpretation is that many members have secrets they prefer to keep. And institutions that protect secrets develop cultures of mutual protection. I raise this not to condemn individual members, but to illustrate a dynamic. Congress protects Congress. Members who might hold agencies accountable discover that holding agencies accountable invites scrutiny of their own conduct. The intelligence community knows things. It has files. It has capabilities. In 1971, FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover was asked why no president had ever fired him, despite decades of documented abuses. His reported answer? Because they all know what I have on them. No one has ever proven that intelligence agencies use information about members of Congress to prevent oversight, but the structural possibility exists, and the pattern, universal reluctance to conduct serious oversight despite documented failures, well, that's consistent with mutual protection. The founders designed a system of separated powers in which each branch would jealously guard its prerogatives against encroachment by the others. Madison wrote in Federalist 51, "Ambition must be made to counteract ambition." The assumption was that institutional self-interest would produce accountability. Congress would resist executive overreach because allowing it would diminish congressional power. The executive would resist congressional interference because allowing it would diminish executive authority. That assumption has failed. Congress has repeatedly declined to exercise its constitutional powers, not because it lacks them, but because exercising them carries costs and produce no electoral benefit. War powers provide the clearest examples. Congress has the sole constitutional authority to declare war, yet presidents have committed forces to sustain combat repeatedly without declarations. Korea, Vietnam, Kosovo, Libya, Syria, and now Iran. Congress protests occasionally. Congress does nothing. This past week, both chambers rejected war power resolutions on Iran. The votes were 47 to 53 in the Senate and 212 to 219 in the House. Party line votes. The president's party defending executive authority, the opposition party objecting for show. When administrations change, the positions reverse. Not ideologically, but because of partisanship. Democrats defended executive war making under Obama. Republicans defended under Trump. The common thread is that whoever holds the executive wins. Madison's ambition counteracting ambition is not there. Party loyalty has replaced institutional loyalty. Members identify more with their party's president than with Congress as an institute. The founders could not have anticipated this. They expected Congress to guard its powers jealously because those powers were the source of congressional importance. They did not anticipate a Congress that would voluntarily surrender its most consequential authorities because maintaining them required effort, generated controversy, offered no re-election benefits. The checks do not check. The balances do not balance. The guardians have chosen not to guard.
I warned against entangling alliances. They did not listen. Now you can trace exactly how it happened.
The Consequential Actions podcast is on YouTube. Subscribe and follow each series from the very beginning.
Principled debate requires participation. Like the episodes. Leave a comment. Join the discussion.
Every series is organized as a playlist, from General Welfare to The New Leviathan to Empire of Liberty. Begin at the beginning.
In our primary episode, episode 10, released last Saturday on YouTube, last Friday on Substack, we examined Operation Mockingbird, the CIA's program to infiltrate American newsrooms. By the mid-1970s, the agency had relationships with journalists at every major news organization. It funded student groups, academic publications, and cultural organizations. It shaped the information environment in which Americans formed opinions about foreign policy. The Church Committee exposed this. The CIA officially ended the program. The director, George H.W. Bush, issued directives prohibiting paid relationships with American journalists. The program ended. The technique did not. In 2018, Sinclair Broadcasting, which owns or operates 193 television stations across the United States, required its local anchors to read a script about biased and false news. The script? Identical across stations.
Hi, I'm Fox San Antonio's Jessica Headley.
And I'm Ryan Wolf.
Our greatest responsibility is to serve our
Treasure Valley communities,
the El Paso, Las Cruces communities,
Eastern Iowa communities,
Mid-Michigan communities.
We are extremely proud of the quality, balanced journalism that CBS 4 News produces.
But we are concerned about the trouble and trend of irresponsible, one-sided news stories plaguing our country.
The sharing of biased and false news has become all too common on social media. More alarming, some media outlets publish these same fake stories without checking facts first.
The sharing of biased and false
news has become all too common on social media.
More alarming, some media outlets publish these stories simply aren't true without checking facts first.
Unfortunately, some members of the media use their platforms to push their own personal bias and agenda to control exactly what people think. And this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
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 The effect, as you just saw, was unsettling. Local news anchors who viewers trusted were revealed to be reading centrally distributed scripts that advanced the parent company's political preferences while appearing to be independent local journalism. This was not the CIA. This was a media corporation pursuing its own interests. But the technique, coordinated messaging that appears organic, that's recognizable. That's the CIA's method, and that method has proliferated. During the tariff disputes of 2025, observers compiled clips of commentators across multiple networks using identical phrases: short-term pain for long-term gain. Different faces, different networks, same words, same cadence. And then, when Operation Epic Fury began, the phrase reappeared, now applied to war with Iran rather than economic policy. Administration officials, congressional supporters, and sympathetic commentators used the same language: short-term pain for long-term gain.
This is a short-term disruption for the long-term gain.
Short-term pain for the long-term gain.
Short-term pain be for long-term gain.
We're going to have some short-term pain with long-term gain.
Short-term pay for a long-term gain.
Some short-term pain, yes, but we've got some long-term gain. Short-term spike for a long-term gain.
Some short-term pain for American consumers.
We may have to deal with that in the short term.
Short-term and temporary.
Temporary, short-term pain.
It's going to suck in the short term.
Some short-term pain.
Short-term pain.
We have to focus on the short-term.
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 Short-term and long-term.
Short-term left.
Hopefully this is a short-term pain.
Short-term is highly outweighed of the long-term benefits.
Some short-term pain for the long-term gain.
Short-term sacrifice for a long-term gain.
It's kind of unsettling. In my special episode on the motivations behind the Iran war that I released on Sunday, I documented what the Wall Street Journal reported about Senator Lindsey Graham's campaign to persuade President Trump to authorize the strikes. Graham told the Journal he worked with retired General Jack Keane and columnist Mark Thiessen. All three are regular presences on Fox News. Graham said they took turns calling the president, wrote opinion columns, and appeared on television programs designed to reach him. When we compared notes, Graham said, there were not a lot of other voices making the case for military action. This was not the CIA placing assets in newsrooms. This was a sitting senator coordinating with a retired general and a columnist to shape the information reaching the president through the media that they knew he consumed. Graham also made several trips to Israel to meet with intelligence officials. He told the Journal, "They will tell me things our own government will not tell me." He then used that information to make his case to the White House. A foreign intelligence service, a sitting senator, television programming designed to influence executive decision-making. I want to be careful here. Coordinated messaging is not the same as Operation Mockingbird. Politicians have always tried to shape media coverage. Interest groups have always funded sympathetic voices. Campaign consultants have always tested phrases and distributed talking points. But the scale has changed. Technology has changed. In Mockingbird's era, the coordination was secret because it was shameful. A newspaper that published CIA propaganda without disclosure would have lost credibility. Today, the coordination is open because no one seems to care. A senator brags to the Wall Street Journal about orchestrating television programming to influence the president. The story is reported. Nothing happens. The same week the Journal published Graham's admission, it was largely ignored. A senator acknowledging coordinating with a foreign intelligence service and a friendly media to shape war policy. In a functioning democracy, this would be a scandal. In ours, it was barely a news cycle. Operation Mockingbird taught a lesson. The lesson was not that media manipulation is wrong. The lesson was that it works. The CIA's program shaped American perceptions of foreign policy for decades. It promoted anti-communist sentiment. It discredited dissident voices. It created an information environment favorable to interventionist policies. When the program was exposed, the consequences were reform recommendations. The technique remained available to anyone willing to use it. Today, think tanks funded by foreign governments produce policy papers cited by American media. Former intelligence officials become television commentators without disclosing their conflicts. Lobbying firms place favorable stories. Social media algorithms amplify coordinated messaging. The CIA may no longer pay journalists. But the ecosystem it helped create, where information is weaponized, where messaging is coordinated, where the appearance of independent journalism masked organized influence campaigns, that ecosystem flourishes. The guardians of information are as compromised as the guardians of power, and the citizens who depend on both are left to navigate a landscape designed to manipulate them. We began with Frank Church's question, who guards the guardians? We have examined the oversight committees that were supposed to guard them and found cheerleaders rather than watchdogs. We have examined Congress more broadly and found an institution that protects itself rather than exercising its constitutional responsibilities. We have examined the information environment and found the techniques of Operation Mockingbird alive, evolved, and flourishing. So let us ask directly, what has held the CIA and the broader intelligence community accountable since 1975? The Church Committee exposed assassinations, coups, domestic surveillance, drug experiments, and media infiltration. It produced 96 recommendations. Oversight committees were created, reforms were enacted. And then, the Iran-Contra scandal revealed that the Reagan administration had funded Nicaraguan rebels through illegal arms sales to Iran, circumventing congressional prohibitions. The principal figures were convicted, then pardoned. No structural changes resulted. The 9/11 Commission documented intelligence failures that preceded the attacks. The commission made recommendations. The Director of National Intelligence position was created. The agencies responsible for the failures continued operating, and their budgets increased. The Iraq WMD failure took the nation to war on false premises. Reports documented the failures. The responsible officers, the officials, received honors. The agencies continued. The torture program violated laws. The Senate investigated. The CIA hacked Senate computers. Let me say that again. The torture program violated laws. The Senate investigated. The CIA hacked the Senate computers. The acting director, well, there was an apology, but no one was prosecuted. No one. In each case, there were hearings, there were reports, there were recommendations, there was zero accountability. The only person to face prosecution over the CIA torture program was John Kiriakou, the whistleblower who revealed it. He served 2 years in federal prison. The only person facing charges over mass surveillance is Edward Snowden. He remains in exile. The man whose lies he exposed, James Clapper, the Director of National Intelligence, who told Congress the NSA did not wittingly collect information on millions of Americans, was never prosecuted. He retired with honors. He became a television commentator. The pattern is clear. Those who commit abuses face no consequences. Those who lie to Congress face no consequences. But those who expose the truth, they're prosecuted. I do not say this to suggest conspiracy. I say it to describe structural reality. The intelligence community controls information. It classifies what it wishes. It briefs whom it chooses. It can reveal information that damages its critics and withhold information that would damage itself. Members of Congress who seek serious oversight find their access restricted. Whistleblowers who bypass official channels face prosecution. Journalists who publish classified information face pressure. The oversight system depends on the cooperation of those being overseen. When they do not cooperate, when they lie to Congress, when they hack congressional computers, when they destroy evidence, the system has no enforcement mechanism. A sitting U.S. president was assassinated in November of 1963. The records surrounding his death were classified. The records surrounding his death were then, by law, to be revealed to the American public, not once, but multiple times over the last 30 years. Those records remain sealed by the intelligence agencies. Sure, some has come out, some has been unredacted, but still, thousands of records remain covered up about the assassination of a president where laws have been written and signed and put into effect to release that information. But there's no enforcement mechanism. What recourse does the Congress have when the CIA lies? It can hold hearings. It can issue reports. It can express concern. It cannot prosecute. It cannot fire. It can reduce budgets, but it never does. Budgets only increase. The ultimate check, cutting appropriations, requires Congress to accept responsibility for consequences if intelligence fails. No member wants that responsibility, so the money flows regardless of performance. There was an article just this week that talked about the missile strikes on the Iranian school in Manab. And it blamed outdated intelligence and cuts to intelligence programs for that result. Of course, the overall defense budget is still $1 trillion, and they're looking to increase it to $1.5 trillion, but they will use that example and point to say this is why we can never cut spending, because intelligence may be compromised. And it's a tough argument to defend. It's a tough argument to counteract. In 1975, Frank Church was willing to expose his own government's crimes. He accepted that doing so might damage national security in the short term because the alternatives, unchecked secret power, he saw that as worse in the long term. So do I. He was defeated for re-election in 1980. His investigation was blamed for weakening American intelligence. The message to future legislators was clear. Serious oversight is politically dangerous. There's been no Frank Church since. No committee has conducted an investigation of comparable scope. The agencies have expanded, their budgets have grown, their operations continue. Who guards the guardians? In theory, Congress. In practice, no one. This episode has been an inventory of failure. The oversight mechanisms created for the Church Committee have not produced accountability. The Iraq intelligence failures, the most consequential since Vietnam, resulted in honors for those responsible. Congressional re-election rates exceed 95% regardless of institutional performance. Coordinated messaging techniques have proliferated while the original program that taught them remains officially ended. In Europe, there is one congressional body that has started to fire their legislators when they are found to be misleading or lying to the public. A real incentive not to be disingenuous or dishonest to the people you're representing. We don't have that. I think for us to enact that, it would take something like an Article 5 constitutional convention. And even so, that would have to be really thought through to ensure we protect for due process. Other than that, I do not offer solutions because I don't know what they would be. Term limits, they might increase turnover, but not necessarily oversight. Campaign finance reform, it might reduce some advantages, but not the structural incentives against accountability. Media literacy, citizens can't verify what they can't access. The problem is not that reforms are unavailable. The problem is that those who would implement reforms benefit from the current system. Members of Congress win re-election. They vote themselves raises and aren't held accountable at the ballot box. An Article 5 convention may happen. That's a way that the public can circumvent the legislature, but the odds of that still remain low. Intelligence agencies receive funding. Media organizations attract audiences. Everyone who could change the incentives profits from maintaining them. In 1975, external pressure forced accountability. The Watergate scandal had shattered public trust. Journalists were investigating aggressively. The political environment made it possible, briefly, for Congress to act. That environment seems to no longer exist. Trust in institutions is lower than ever, but the response has been fragmentation rather than reform. Americans consume information that confirms their existing beliefs. They distrust media that challenges their preferences. They re-elect their own representatives while condemning Congress as an institution. They align Team Red or Team Blue. Next Saturday, Episode 11 will examine Graveyard of Empires, Vietnam and the Limits of Power. We trace the catastrophic war that killed millions, shattered domestic consensus, and demonstrated that American military force could not reshape societies at will. That history is directly relevant to what's unfolding in Iran. And this past Sunday, we released the article on our Substack page. The question Frank Church asked in 1975 remains unanswered. Who guards the guardians? The uncomfortable answer is that in a democracy, the guardians are ultimately us, the citizens. We elect the Congress that conducts oversight. We consume the media that shapes our understanding. We accept or reject the information we receive. If accountability has failed, we bear the ultimate responsibility. The question is whether we are willing to accept that responsibility or whether we prefer to be managed by institutions that profit from our inattention, our apathy, and our ignorance. I am Jeff Kellick, and this has been episode 10, part B of Empire of Liberty, America's Foreign Entanglements from the Founders to the Forever Wars, on the Consequential Actions podcast. If you have enjoyed this episode and want to follow the series, please subscribe to our Substack page at consequentialactions.com, where you'll find all written articles as well as our previous series on the General Welfare Clause and the New Leviathan. Subscribe to our YouTube channel at Consequential Actions Podcast for video versions of all podcast episodes, and follow me on X at jkellick for updates, discussions, and announcements. We continue to post articles and welcome your participation. Until next time, have a great day.